We're going to call the Board of Animal Services Commission meeting to order for Tuesday, April 8th. First item on the agenda is roll call. Commissioner Gross.
Present.
Commissioner Yanez.
Here.
Commissioner Zaft.
Here.
Commissioner Brent.
Present.
Commissioner Wolfson.
Here.
All commissioners present. We have a quorum. First item on the agenda is going to be public comment.
You know, before we get started, I wanted to just make a couple of opening remarks. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming out today. Really appreciate the interest and participation. In order to make sure we allow a lot of time for participation, but also make sure we get through our agenda, I just wanted to make a couple of opening remarks about what we're going to do here today. So we're going to start with public comment. Then we have the approval of February minutes. February 25th meeting, that'll be quick. There is one discussion item on biodegradable dog waste bags. There are two board reports, one regarding changes to the barking dog ordinance that have been proposed, and one regarding the RFP for animal management software. And we're going to close, as we always do, with the oral report of the general manager. I just wanted to make a few comments. You know, we've been discussing a number of important items that have come up on recent meetings, and I just wanted to let people know we obviously only have a limited amount of time at each meeting, but a lot of the important items that have been raised are the subject of discussion. You're going to see them on future agendas, including further items relating to the spay neuter ordinance, enforcement, education. We're going to have an agenda item coming up about rabbits, and then some other items. So just because you don't see it on this meeting's agenda or any particular meeting's agenda, don't think that we aren't already, we haven't heard what you've said. We're talking about it, and we're going to fit it in sometime soon. Everybody here very much values your input and participation. We read your emails. We listen to what you say at these meetings, so please keep them coming. But a number of these items are complicated, and a lot of us are new. It's going to take time for us to get our arms around it. And so there may be items where we're going to have them come up repeatedly on agendas while we educate ourselves, identify the issues, and work with Brenda and the staff to come up with proposed solutions. We haven't been getting through the agendas at recent meetings, and some items have been pushed from meeting to meeting, so my goal is to start making sure the agenda is doable. Each of our meetings, I think, are going to tend to last about 3 hours, from 10 to 1. We'll shoot to get done sooner if we can, but we really can't go probably beyond that, or we start to lose commissioners and we start to lose a quorum. So we're shooting to finish up here today about 1. We're going to start with public comment. We'll start going through the items. We'll probably take about a 10-minute break sometime around 11:45 or noon. Also, as you know, sometimes we have appeals we have to hear, and that's an important part of our job. So that also takes up time. So I just wanted to throw that out there, let you know we appreciate your patience. We really appreciate your input. This is a process. Not everything can happen overnight or immediately. Also, while I'm here in public, I just wanted to reiterate to my fellow commissioners to make sure to communicate to Brenda and staff when there are items that you want to see on the agenda. I know you've been doing that, but I just wanted to reiterate that. I meet with Brenda regularly, and we talk about how to prioritize and put things on agendas to make sure we're not overlooking anything, but that things are getting brought before the commission in a timely way. We have a great turnout today. Due to the increased number of people, we're going to have a pretty long public comment period, but it's not going to be open-ended, and we have to put a cap on it. So I'm thinking about 45 minutes. Each speaker gets 3 minutes, so it's about 15 people we'll get to hear from. You can always communicate to us at other meetings. Many of you have our emails, so there are other ways to communicate. But we do want to hear from you. We just can't be here for hours and hours and just have an open-ended period. So also, if you can come up and you get 3 minutes, but if you can state your point and make your points in less time, that'll allow more people to be able to make public comment. So just keep that in mind. And if you have comments relating to a specific agenda item, please save those for that agenda item so that we have more time for the general open public comment period. We can fit more people that way. When you come up, please state your name clearly before you start speaking. Also, please let us know where you live, what city. I just encourage people to keep your tone civil. People have very serious concerns. You're passionate. We are too. We want to hear what you say. We want to hear your criticisms. But it is easier, I think, for us to hear the substance of what you're saying if you can refrain from insults, name calling, talking down to people. You have freedom of speech, so you can do as you please, but just know that I think we all hear much clearer if you focus on the substance of the issue. Okay, so we're going to start with public comment. After about 45 minutes, we'll turn to our agenda. One other thing I wanted to mention, in order to fit as many people in as possible, I'm going to be pretty strict, and Ross is going to be pretty strict about the time limits today. So 3 minutes is a good amount of time. Don't expect that you're going to go beyond that, so try to keep that in mind when you're speaking. Okay. And with that, Ross.
Fellas?
How did you get to be number one?
Good morning, Phyllis Story. Is this on? Phyllis Story of Animal Issues Movement. I brought you a gift from the city today. These are from your own department that nobody bothers to make anymore. And I brought this one for you. These are all Los Angeles Animal Services stickers. So you can use those for your bumpers and get the message out about standing. I want to talk to you about licensing and staffing at the department. I know Mr. Wilson took exception when I said that the cost is not effective. But if you figure right now we have 8 people on full-time on licensing, and then every shelter is ordered 1 day a week at least to devote one of their real officers that's out there supposedly doing humane work to licensing. So you figure all that, just with the 8 alone, that's at a minimum unburdened salary. You can add 10 to 15,000 onto this per person. 460,000 plus your lieutenant pay, which is about 75,000. We're talking about over $550,000 a year. At 20 a month, that's 240,000. When I say this is not cost effective, that's why I'm saying it. And if you think that the people out there are happy to see an officer come to the door, you are wrong, believe me. And I want to tell you something that's happening, and I hope that you will check this through the audit section. I'll never ask you to take my word. From what I understand, after the officers leave, they're doing about 7.5 licenses per day now a piece. That's less than 1 an hour. But after they leave, at least 50% of those people are canceling. It's all done by credit card, no cash is taken. They're canceling that. So by the time it gets down here, we're doing less than half of that, and I'm going to ask you to please get the audit directly from the accountant. Do not take Ms. Barnette's report. Do not take Mr. Salazar's report. You need to know the truth because you're not hearing the truth about things. This is extremely important, and also there are 19 people being, or not 18 right now, on special administrative assignments. Out of the 64 that we have, then you take off the ones that are on leave. We are under 30 officers out in the staff, 24 hours a day for 7 shelters. Last thing I want you to know, and this is the truth, instruction has been given to stop barking dog hearings, only do dangerous animal hearings. And you can check that out with the department. Mark Salazar gave the instruction, and find out why we are doing that also. All right, I can take less than 3 minutes.
Thank you, Phyllis, but you didn't tell us where you live.
Pardon?
What city do you live in?
Oh, Los Angeles.
Thank you.
Right downtown.
Okay.
Mr. President, one suggestion, maybe we can have 2 people here, so as soon as one's done, we can go to the next.
Sounds good.
Will we all turn off our phones as well?
Certainly people should turn off their phones, but also people use phones for a variety of constructive reasons, and I think that's permitted. Mr. Poole, maybe we could say who's up and then who's on deck.
Okay, Dan, you're up, and Jennifer is, Shargonoski is in the second chair.
Okay.
Good morning, Daniel Gus from the Stand Foundation, Sherman Oaks. In the past 2 weeks, I've sent you a lengthy history of animals who are either from backyard breeders or quote-unquote legitimate breeders. 11 pit bull puppies for sale. On Craigslist, we provided the address. 5-week-old pit bulls, red nose on Craigslist, the address was included. 827 West 98th Street. We've shown you all of these, and Brenda's made a big point in recent weeks saying, oh, it's resource sapping to respond to CPRAs to follow up whether or not she investigated these breeders. No, the reason she does not respond to CPRA requests is there's no report. She never enforced the complaint. She never went out to check on them. It's not that Ross has to look them up. Ross responds to the one where there's a report. But anytime there's a breeder, and they never investigated, whether it's 6 months ago, a year ago, or 3 years ago, that's the reason Brenda doesn't respond to CPRA requests, because she doesn't want to enforce breeding. Why? Well, for example, here's a dog breeder show, the Southern California Portuguese Water Club, May 23rd of last year. Owner of Cutwater, it had to be new, Mary Alice Davis, Brenda's daughter, and Brenda Barnette. So she's actively participating in dog breeder shows. Her agenda is to make things easier for dog breeders by not enforcing the law and by shoveling thousands of dogs that are mislabeled to best friends as adoptions. She can say, oh, I've done a great job reducing the breeding environment, let's make it easier for everybody else. But here's something interesting that happened at City Council last 2 months ago. Mitch Englander honored a breeder by the name of Richard Hilton and Diana Lapari, and Mitch Englander has him get up there and say, oh, you're a championship beagle breeder also, aren't you? And he says, yes, I sell my beagles. Well, guess what? I ran a CPRA request, and in a couple of days, Ross confirmed that they have no breeding license. So City Hall is honoring dog breeders at City Council. By the way, I did a cursory review of American Kennel Club documents and documents online. Here's somebody who owes the city a minimum of $17,000. So you want to talk about revenue? You want to talk about a breeder who doesn't pay fees to the city? How about this? Brenda did nothing about this complaint when I brought it to her attention. So now the mayor's office is actually aware of this now because they're afraid I'm going to write an editorial about it. And the $17,000 that Brenda's precious breeder friends don't pay the city. So talk about revenue. There's not a revenue problem. There's an enforcement problem. Now, I've had a polite dialogue with Commissioner Wolfson, who I know has spent a few hours at a local shelter. Where do you think the animals in the shelter now are coming from? It's these dogs. It's their children, it's their grandchildren, it's their great-grandchildren. So by not enforcing these things from 2 years ago, 3 years ago, or 2 months ago, that's where these animals are coming from. It's enforcement. If you're going to pine for the animals, pine for the failure to enforce spay neuter then. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sue, Bruce.
Okay, so next is Ms. Charnoski, but you can come and have a seat. Thank you.
Jennifer.
My name is Jennifer Charnoski. I live in West Adams in South Los Angeles. Every year, my husband and I rescue at least a dozen stray dogs and cats, almost none of whom are fixed. And with the help of rescue groups, we do find homes for them. So where did they come from? We know they don't come from the shelter system because they are not fixed. And my area is pretty low income. Probably few of their owners bought them in expensive pet stores or from breeders. So my only conclusion is that they are coming from backyard breeders, people who either through ignorance or greed are letting their animals breed non-stop. So what can be done? And some of these suggestions may cost money, but of course they will save money in the long run. First is education. We need more print and voice campaigns about the spay-neuter law. And I say voice campaigns because there is quite a bit of illiteracy in the city, in 3 languages, English, Spanish, and Korean. You can also reach people through block clubs and through neighborhood councils and through the senior lead officers of the LAPD who attend most of these block club meetings and can disseminate information easily to the residents. You can also follow through on tips from the community. As we just heard, I've turned in numerous animals and nothing was ever done. Okay, so that's like the carrot. That's education. The stick is breeder's licenses are what, a couple of $100? Let's charge $5,000 for everybody. Let's make them get a business license and pay taxes. And that revenue can be used for spay and neuter. Let's give out tickets for violations. Give folks a chance to remedy the situation, but if they don't within a short period, then let's have them pay a fine, and let's make it be a hefty fine. And the carrot, of course, would be free and or very low cost, easily accessible spay and neuter. Those vans that go out, they're great. I myself have tried numerous times to make appointments, and I'm a well-educated person. I have a phone. I cannot get an appointment. It's very, very difficult. Let's have the free, very low-cost spay and neuter be easily accessible.
Thank you. Who's next and who's on deck?
Kay Boychenko.
I'll defer my time in case anyone needs it.
Thank you.
Okay, Yvette Burke.
My name is Sue Bruce. I live in Chatsworth, and I run my own rescue. It's a small group. I feel like we're constantly losing a battle every day because LA Animal Services is inefficient. And I don't want to be redundant and repeat what everyone else has already said, but it needs to be public knowledge that the laws exist. Spay and neuter is legal, is required. It's the law. Breeding is illegal unless you're permitted, I guess, which I still don't agree with. And the selling of animals. It doesn't matter what I say to somebody, my neighbor, somebody I meet at the store. They don't care because I'm just a crazy rescuer is the way they look at me. But if somebody's going to their door in a uniform and saying, you're going to be fined, then they're going to do something about it. So we need help. That's it. Thank you.
My name is Yvette Burke.
Who's next?
Carol Saxon in the second chair.
I'd like to defer my time to somebody.
Jasmine, Gabby.
Okay, Ms. Burke.
My name is Yvette Burke. I am from Woodland Hills, and I represent Petopia Animal Rescue Pet Adoption Center. We are the alternative for shelters. We represent a storefront in the Westfield Promenade Mall to provide show space for rescue groups to be able to have their animals on a regular basis seen by the public for adoption. What we're facing right now is that we are being inundated with bottle babies where we have been outright told by the city shelter repeated calls to the shelter partner best friends go unanswered, unreturned, and are ineffective in picking up the bottle babies, and unless we come, they will be euthanized within the hour. One group has taken 100 bottle babies. We've taken in 6. My questions are, how is it a shelter gets a $1 sweetheart deal with the city that includes a nursery, and yet, excuse me, we as rescue organizations with no $1 million budgets, with no monies in overseas bank accounts, are the ones pulling these animals, pulling the high-risk, red-listed surgical cases, seniors. When a partner was established that gets carte blanche to pull with no pull fees, we have to pay pull fees, we pay the surgical costs, we pay for all of our food, litter, medical expenses as nonprofits soliciting the public. We are successful in our venue, in a mall, with getting high numbers of adoptions for those that were deemed unadoptable from the city shelter. And we're doing it because we are taking the time to assess, socialize, and network animals that deserve homes, not death. Thank you.
Thank you.
Carol Davis in the second chair.
While she's coming up, you can.
I'm Jasmine Gabay. My rescue is Saving Canine Lives Plus. It's in Encino. And I am totally new to all this. I mean, I adopted my first dog 7 years ago, and we started our rescue about 3 years ago. So I'm learning a lot from everybody. And one of the things that I have noticed, and I kind of thought about it, is like, why breeders? I mean, they should be given community time at the shelter. You pay the fee, and then you have to give 20 hours of volunteer time and see what's happening to the animals, especially the ones on death row. So before they actually go and breed, let their eyes be opened up. My eyes were opened up. My friend asked me, I'm sorry, I'm a little nervous, this is the first time I've done this. My friend asked me for a little dog like mine. So I saw East Valley when it was brand new, and I thought, wow, what has everybody talking about? This is a beautiful shelter. Until I went to this outskirts, and I saw what happened. And then I started the blank drives and the fostering. But it's just, what I'm trying to say is, you have to open people's eyes. My eyes were open, and my life changed. So I think, you know, breeders should have community time to help.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Irene Sorolano in the second chair. Carol.
I'm Carol Davis. I'm with the Companion Animal Protection Society, West Coast Director, and I live in the city of Los Angeles. I thank you for your opening comments. They made a lot of sense. You know, really glad for those opening comments. I'm here today for several reasons. One of the main reasons is that we've got for each of the commissioners a report on non-compliance. It's called the Report of Non-Compliance by LA Pet Stores and Lack of Enforcement by Los Angeles Animal Services. We did a 2-year investigation years ago that led to all of these ordinances to ban the sale of factory-bred dogs, cats, and rabbits in the stores. You all know all about that. But we've done a follow-up investigation late last year, and then again recently, just a week ago. And we found that pet stores are not complying with the law. So we've got transcripts for you of that investigation. Videos are up online with the links so that you, the commissioners, can see that the pet stores are openly, willingly violating the law. To me, they told me that they could get me a puppy anytime, anything I want, and that they know that it's illegal, but that they would meet me at another location. So this is not what the city council wanted. The city council wanted this to pass. The people of Los Angeles really wanted this, and that's why the city council passed this law. And what we find is a department that is unwilling to enforce this law. We get the same answer that there are no funds, that there are no people to go out. But we have done the city a service now for years doing these investigations, and we're doing this free of charge to the city. And believe me, for me personally, it's been thousands of hours that I'm giving to the city in order for the city to know the facts about where these pet stores are. Now, there aren't that many. We found that there's been a positive effect of the ordinance, and that is it's a deterrent for stores to come and start mushrooming like they were doing before we started this movement. So for that, I'm really thankful to all the activists from all the different organizations that have really worked on this project. Everybody. So that's good. That's a really good thing. It means that the public is kind of getting aware, and that we're really happy with. But we really need to crack down on the ones that aren't, and as soon as they get cited and fined, that'll stop. And then, of course, we have to work on the internet situation. But here, I've got for you today are the reports, so you can see the transcripts of the interaction between pet store owners and our undercover investigators. And the report is all here for all of you. And I thank you all to put pressure on the department to enforce. There is money, and this is a revenue stream that is being willfully ignored. Okay? I mean, this is deliberate ignoring of the revenue stream. So that's it for me right now, and thank you very much for your service. We have hope for the first time in a long time.
I defer to the next person.
5.
That's for each of you.
Kendall Wapner.
Good morning to the commission members. My name is Irene Soriano, and I'm the...
Thank you. Sorry.
Okay.
Could you start over?
Sure. Okay. Good morning to the commission members. My name is Irene Soriano, and I'm the founder of Bark and Fur Alliance Fund. BNP is a grassroots community-based funding and advocacy group that joins other rescue efforts in Los Angeles to champion improved quality of life solutions for seniors and special needs animals, also known as less desirable, perceived to be unadoptable to the public that enter our city and county LA sheltering system. It was distressing for me to read that LAAS animals sent out through the transport program are being sent to receiving agencies outside California that kill for space. While reassurances are made that transport animals are guaranteed safety, there's something not right with this arrangement. When special needs and senior shelter animal advocates hear killing for space, we know what this sad practice means. It means that the vulnerable population, first on the chopping block and euthanizing needle, will be the population we serve. Older, injured, and special need dogs, cats, and bunnies will be euthanized first. What this sounds like to me is something very sad going on. There was a shelter transport contract in place to save LA animals in exchange for the deaths of another receiving agency's population, now deemed expendable. I would like to know what existing policy or arrangement makes our LA animals special. If the transport system is forcing another agency to kill for space in Oregon, I cannot support this. Just because the killing is not happening in my LA backyard, but now in a receiving agency in Oregon or other areas, sure to have senior and special need animals guaranteed to be put down first, makes it just as unacceptable. Please review the transport system now in place.
Next, Michelle Peacock.
I'm deferring.
Pardon me?
Just deferring.
Grace Lamb.
I'm here.
Go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Kendall Wapner. I'm from Simi Valley. I know I'm from Ventura County, but I hope to add laws to Ventura County like this one. But in my own opinion, I think we're becoming monsters, mankind. And I think that laws like the one that requires spay and neutering stops us from progressing further. But the laws aren't working, so we need enforcement. But I think now the question is, when are we going to get the enforcement? We know that we need enforcement, but we don't know when it's going to happen. And that's why I'm here. I want to find out when you guys will try to add enforcement. I think that's all I have to say.
Well, thank you.
Hi, my name is Grace.
Before you begin.
Beverly Bernwald, second chair.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Grace, and I'm here representing Bunny World Foundation. About 2 months ago, Bunny World Foundation went out to a breeder in LA. They had 127 rabbits, and Bunny World Foundation took about 30 rabbits off. Since the 2 months have passed, our founder of Bunny World, Layla, she's sitting right there. She has had communication with Brenda Barnette, but Brenda has, the communication has not been going well because, quote unquote, on March 26, 2014, Brenda Barnette said Captain Bauer addressed this issue at our WOOF staff meeting this morning. The rabbits are fine where they are right now. I have some pictures here. Brenda has seen these pictures and she thinks these conditions are fine for the rabbits. I'd like to pass them around, so if you guys could go around and just look at every picture. I mean, it's obvious the rabbits are covered in feces. It's caked onto the bottom of the rabbit's foot, right there. I don't think that's sanitary. And there's conditions where rabbits are in their feces. There's no water. I don't understand why that's okay. So I'm here today to see how you guys and
and us, Bunny World Foundation, can move forward with this investigation. Namely, I have questions about why are there still 66 rabbits with this breeder after 4 LA animal control visits? That's one question. The second question is, why weren't these rabbits impounded during the first visit? And the third question is LA Animal Services going to press charges on this breeder? Fourth question is, how soon can we expect these rabbits out? Fifth question is, why wasn't Bunny World Foundation allowed to help in this case? Why didn't we collaborate? We feel we could get so much more done if we both work together. I understand that you guys don't have spaces in your shelter, but you have spay and neuter funding, around $800,000 set aside for spay and neuter. And we have space, but we don't have the funds for spay and neuter. We did get the 30 that we took off spayed and neutered from volunteers and from donations, but we need more funding for that. So moving forward, how can we move forward if this case is being so mishandled? 2 or 3 months later, these animals are still suffering. And why are they still in the midst of their feces? Like this, something should be immediately done about that. And what can you do to help us with this situation?
The next, Second Chair Mark Peralta. Go ahead.
I'm Beverly Burwald, and I run a small rescue out in Encino called LA Community Cats, also City Ferals by the IRS. And I believe you can have all the most wonderful, most advanced software in the world, but if we do not have a human element operating at these shelters, we have missed the point of LA Animal Services. This is the city of angels, and the people that are being hired there are far from angelic. They are not the most sensitive people. And I know that you're hiring people because you want them as cold-blooded as possible to be able to euthanize these animals. That's not right. There are people in the rescue community that will work with the shelters. If anything, if we have to go on euthanizing, we also have to go on being decent. These are sentient beings. These are animals. These are not stuffed toys that are being brought in and conveyed out as though they have no feelings. Why not work with the rescue community? This is a huge resource to tap into. We will help you. We will deal with you. We have hundreds of people who are networking animals every day. There's no reason why we can't make this a better community for the animals. That's all I have to say.
Who's next? Oh,
Anybody next? Terry Austin's next. Mark, you're up.
Thank you for your time and allowing me to speak today. I often come to the commission meetings, and I've been with Best Friends now for just over a year. I came to my first commission meeting, I believe it was almost a year ago. And there's been a lot of questions. We've actually even posed a Q&A with me, I believe it was last April, last May, addressing a lot of the issues that still seem to come up. But there's a couple that I would like to address to you directly today with my short time here. Obviously, through some forwarded emails and through today's meeting, I've heard about the organ transports. And as things stand and as the fact stands, as I know that I'm sitting in this chair right now, is that we have 2 organ transport partners. One is the Oregon Humane Society and one is the Greenville Humane Society. One is in Eugene and one is in Portland. Both of them statistically report 90% save rates and above. It's on their websites. I will go back and do some research and make sure, and I'd be open to anybody or any suggestions or any information, because none have come to me currently. So, and investigate that further. But the Oregon Humane Society is a well-known, reputable humane society in Portland, as is Greenville and Eugene. The other thing that tends to come up a lot throughout our time, my time here in LA, is the sweetheart deal in us of selecting of animals from LA animal shelters and and getting preferential treatment on animals. We pull animals just as the New Hope partners. We have the same wait periods. That does include this new change. We voluntarily decided to do the same because we are excited that LA Animal Services seems to deem under 30-pound animals at less at risk, and really seems to me as this policy is trying to push us all towards rescuing larger dogs and animals that are in need. It's exactly where we wanted to be 5 years ago, and this is a plan to get there. That being said, I would just invite you to come to the center. It's open 7 days a week, it's open 12 to 8. Don't tell me when you're coming, and just stop by. You can see the population. That goes for the public as well. I think that's the best way to address it. We definitely want to keep a diverse floor of animals. But that being said, we're 50% pit bull on the floor, and if you come to our shelter, you can see that. I also just want to, and this is the first thing I ever said when I came to a commission meeting, which was baffling to me, is that there's a lot of groups and there's a lot of passion with people that come up here, and they all mean well, and they all want to do well for animals, but so does LA Animal Services. Obviously, so do I. We want to stay honest, and it's okay to get criticism, and I take it as that. But I want to let people know that I'm here to answer questions if need be, and I will make myself available to do so for people. So thank you for your time, and thank you for all you're doing.
Thanks so much, Mark. Mark, before you step away, where do you live?
I live in the city of Los Angeles.
Excellent, thank you.
Laurel Kinder, second chair.
Terry Austin, the Amanda Foundation. Morning, commissioners. Last time I was here, my time ran out before I could explain what I meant about using percentages rather than hard numbers. And my point was that in the WOOF stats, all the end numbers are percentages. And the first lesson you learn in the statistics class is that statistics look better than hard numbers. So if you've got 56,000 animals coming into the shelter this year and last year and the year before, it matters to me a little less what's happening to them once they get there, more than why the number isn't declining coming in, because that's not solving a problem. And then you have all the people asking about what's happening to them once they get into the shelter. But my point is that if you have 2 animals and the next month you adopt out 2 more, then you've increased your numbers by 50%, but you've only adopted out 2 more animals. So that's what I was saying about hard numbers. I have been impressed by the people coming up here today. Yeah, the word is out that there's a really strong commission and people want to be heard. This is the tip of the iceberg, I promise you. There's going to be more about this. And the reason is that the point that keeps being said from all different people, this very diverse group, and a lot of people, I don't know them, is that a lack of enforcement. Now, last commission meeting, you had a very industrious young woman come up here, part of your task, your employees from the shelter, who said, yeah, I came up with an idea, and I went into my supervisor with no money, no plan, no budget, no anything, and I said, hey, why don't we get some boots on the ground? And everyone congratulated her. Everyone was really happy about that. But this is what she said. One employee, no plan, no money, no I can't do it, went out and actually did something, and everybody congratulated her. We have the assets for enforcement. It is how they are being used. Does it not seem ridiculous to be chasing people down for $20 license when you've got a $300 breeding fee out there? It's just, so my point is about the management of the assets we have. Just take all of what you've got and how you can best use it. The complaints about best practice, your contract's coming up, is it in here? Take a hard look at that contract. They're currently using about 100 spaces for animals. The shelter actually holds 300. Maybe they're going to be that idea of being able to house some animals that they get that space for. Only a third of it's being used. And that's one thing. The other thing is, please don't forget about that $400,000 is being used by budget. Clearly, it's still the most effective tool. It's still on the table. Don't forget about it. I put the word out. I offered to go to all the different shelters 3 times each shelter to speak to all the employees so they tell the public about the spay that's available, not just my program, the time program, the family animal program, all the programs that are out there. I did see 2 emails on the phone call, but I hardly come from shelters. So I'm offering my time. 7 days a week, 365 days a year, unfortunately, I get there.
united system will really exist. I know this is public comment in the discussion, but I do want to just point out that I was at best friend on Sunday, and I really suggest people to take more public off for the visit. The place is full, it's not wonderful. There are 300 animals, I saw them, they're mostly pit bulls. It's really an amazing organization. And that's not to take away from any of the amazing people. Everybody here is. Thank you. Sorry.
I wanted to talk a little bit about word on the street is. And word on the street is that if you have an unfixed animal and you live in this area and your animal gets picked up, your animals can get out and stay within the Palmdale or somewhere else. So I'm staying in the shelter on Monday, which is one of the reasons I think they don't want to send them anymore. It's closed. 2 pit bulls go out with the owner. Obviously been breeding. 2 blue heads, not fixed, nipples hanging out. And they're able to leave our shelter, even though they're picked up in Los Angeles, because they were told that they live in Palmdale. Well, I turned my phone on and I recorded speaking to the woman myself. She said she lived in Los Angeles. Because I have a way with people, sometimes I can get them to talk. Anyway, so this is, now I've heard this from more than one person that people are doing this. This kind of thing spreads very quickly. I think if a dog is picked up in Los Angeles and it's not fixed, it should not get out of our shelter that way. Second thing, and this was reported and the video was sent to Brenda. So, and I'm the public apparently, so I don't have any right to any, actions that they take, so I don't know what happened. As far as transporting dogs, everyone knows I transport a lot of dogs by the thousands, somewhere up in the 8,000 to 9,000. Most of the dogs that we send are from 5 to 7 years old. We clean their teeth first, and we send them. So the concept of what this woman was saying, that there's young dogs being sent to kill the old dogs, is completely incorrect. Our places say that a 7-year-old is not old to them because there's no small dogs. We physically are there on these premises. We've partnered with them for years and years. We don't send to rescues, we send to humane societies, same as Best Friends. Believe me, Best Friends knows where they're sending their dogs. So this idea that some old dogs are getting killed, let me tell you, I passed 9-year-olds as 7-year-olds before. Just clean their teeth a little bit and we find out they're a little younger than we thought. So these old dogs are getting out by the thousands with us and they're not being killed and no one's being killed to let them in. Okay.
Thank you.
Michelle Lawrence is next.
Hello, my name is Natasha David. I'm from Benny World Foundation. And I'm very new to this too. And I've been with Benny World Foundation for almost a year only. And during this very short journey so far, I've seen a lot of suffering, a lot of healthy animals that couldn't be saved. We saved a lot. I'm fostering 10 rabbits so far, and I've fostered about 30 since a year almost. And the thing I noticed is that so much pain and waste of these animal lives could be avoided by simply controlling the breeders. That I think it's the whole problem is the breeders. And if we could just do something about that, that would require the breeders to at least spay and neuter their animals that would be sold as pets to the public. That would really help to control the overpopulation of pets, of animals that finally end up being killed at the shelters. And that's it. I think it's all about regulation and enforcement, and that's it. I mean, it's just, my whole point is there. It's the overpopulation of animals could be avoided by that.
I think we're gonna go to 11 for public comment.
Okay, Michelle.
My name is Michelle Lawrence. I'm from Sherman Oaks. I'm here on behalf of Bunny World Foundation. And I would like to get bunnies on the agenda with cats and dogs. When I first became a bunny owner 9 years ago, didn't know anything about them. When I told people I had rabbits, they're just sort of like, oh, you have rabbits. You know, they aren't thought of as being companion pets like cats and dogs are. But they truly are, you know, they're very different from cats and dogs. They have to go to different vets. They don't, you know, make noises the same way. They have to, you know, it's harder to socialize them. The other thing that's different about them is there's a reason why they call it breeding like rabbits. Oh boy, do they breed. Their gestation period is half what cats and dogs are. It's a month. And their average litter is slightly larger, but they live just as long. Rabbits live 8 to 12 years. Cats, yes, can live 12 to 15, but we know some dogs, depending on their size, you know, live even fewer years than that. If in 7 years, there's a PhD at the University of Miami, and she did calculated some data. You know, if a cat and her offspring in 7 years could produce 40,000 cats. Now, I've also seen a number like 11 million. But with bunnies, we're talking hundreds of billions. We're talking about 185 billion rabbits from one rabbit over the course of 7 years. If we can control the breeding, we can control the population, then the funds needed for spaying and neutering wouldn't be as astronomical. It would be smaller. And so I want to get bunnies on the agenda along with cats and dogs. And I would like to ask that the breeders, you know, have licenses, be required to have licenses, and that it be, you know, strictly enforced so that we can reduce the overpopulation, we can reduce the animal cruelty that results because of the overpopulation, because you can't take care of that many animals. I mean, 127 rabbits, that's a lot of rabbits. They take space. Rabbits need a place to run around in. They're like dogs and cats that way. They can't just be kept in a cage. They're not hamsters. They're not mice. Now, this is not to say that cats and dogs should not be paid attention to. You know, I agree with what everybody's saying. Rabbits are animals too, and they need to be thought of as that way. Thank you.
Mary Catalano in the second seat.
Leila Hajmartovich, founder, president of Biodegradable Foundation. Nice to see you again. I guess I'm pleased that we are going to have all rabbit conference very soon, so we can bring a lot of points to the agenda. There are a lot. We could write a book about all the needs for rabbits at this point, from including them into regulation to drafting the regulation to enforcing the regulation to punishing those who break those rules. But there are things we can do now, because that's a big plan to regulate the commercial breeders, to enforce all this, and pretty much ask for the same privileges as cats and dogs rescuers are asking. There's nothing different from what we are wanting for rabbits, except we have one more step to climb until we get to the point where they are. But everything applies to the rabbits. However, there are things happening now. There are animals suffering now. There are animals in a very serious predicament right now. And we don't want to perpetuate the system. I just attended a political discussion last weekend, and this wonderful lady said, we're not here to perpetuate the system, we're here to disrupt it, and we need to disrupt it because antiquated rules are not applicable anymore. Certain rules that are in place may change in about a year or two, but we should find some ways of collaborating with LA Animal Services where we can help each other. Just like my colleague said, we have the know-how. We know how to take 100 rabbits today and put them in 10 homes instead of the shelter killing 100 rabbits and taking these 100 rabbits in. We know how to sex them quickly, and we know how to foster them quickly. We just don't have funds. We're all volunteers. We have full-time jobs. We don't have the funds, and we can't put 10 boys together because they'll fight. They'll kill each other. They go for the jugular. That's how terrible they are. So I'm asking for a polite, respectful dialogue with LA Animal Services, because no one is here to cause drama and war. We are here to help the animals. Specifically, I would like to discuss this case of 127 rabbits that are still there. It is mind-boggling to me that after 4 LA Animal Services visits, they are still there. It is not normal that LA Animal Services has a jurisdiction or has hijacked this particular case, that neither PETA can interfere nor I always confuse the two, can interfere, that Humane Society cannot interfere, that we cannot interfere. These rabbits are still there, and the department is making excuses for the breeders instead of protecting the victims. That is my issue right now. It has to be resolved now, not tomorrow. They're still there. Thank you.
Let's do one more after the president.
This is the last one.
Oh, we've gotten through. That's, yeah. I didn't know how many cards were left. So this will be our last public comment.
After this one. Okay. My name? Mary Catalano.
Where you live?
Where do I live? Los Angeles. I love these, but they're wrong. It should say, free spay neuter, ask us how, LA Animal Services, okay, contact us, it's the law, and it should be in Spanish. And it should be on police cars, okay? And it should be a ticket that you give human beings with dogs with balls, okay? And police can see balls, they're all about balls, okay? And I've asked police to tell me, do you know if a dog's neutered or not? And they actually tell me they don't know, okay? But if you can see that visual part, okay? Or breasts hanging down, that means the dog is not sterilized, okay? Now, I know we don't have it worked out with the city council that we can't give a citation like a parking ticket, but if it went up like a parking ticket and actually was enforced, it would be a miraculous occurrence. You would have gazillions of dollars. Because you go to Venice Beach on the weekends, you see those homies down there with the dogs with the balls on the weekends, and the police don't completely ignore them. There's never an animal officer down there to give citations to the dogs with the balls. Again, I love saying balls, okay, but we don't need them, okay? We don't need the balls, okay? We need animals sterilized. We haven't, I don't know why we even bothered getting the ordinance if it's not enforced. It's a horrifying situation. By the way, I don't know which one of the lovely people went to the Best Friends, but it's La La Land. You have to spend the weekend in South LA watching the Parade O Dumping, okay? Parade O Dumping. North Central, East Valley. Why are you bringing the dog in? We have too many. Excuse me, we have too many? Do you not make a note in the computer and send an officer that week to go and get those damn animals fixed in the house? Ding, 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 we have too many, okay? That's not right. This is bottle babies. They were just born. Where is the mother? They never ask where the mother is. They never ask where the mother is. They just take the little babies, hold them for an hour after they call 3 or 4 rescues that are dying over the weekend doing adoptions, and then they kill them that day. Okay, that's what happens with bottle babies. Nobody ever finds out where is the mother, okay? We have tons of people that spend their evenings going out and feeding feral cats and trapping them. It's a horror show, and they go to those. And matter of fact, Whitney Smith actually goes out and feeds cats around the South LA shelter that she trapped and neutered. They're across the street to the pound. She fixes them. She actually feeds them every night of her life. She goes to the new shelter where she found another bunch of cats that weren't fixed those cats. And they're across the street, okay? We're talking about South LA. Go visit that lovely area. Like I told you before, it's a horror show that that pound is there because nobody wants to go there. It's a horror. I don't want to go there during the day. I need some more time. I got to tell you one more thing.
You know what?
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Somebody give her the time.
But it's a public,
Guys.
it's a public forum, okay?
It is, and everybody gets 3 minutes, and I need to control this. I appreciate the input, Mary. We're gonna go on to the agenda now. And there are other ways to communicate with us. We have our emails on the website. But if I got criticized after the last meeting for allowing more time for someone and not someone else, and so my solution to that is to give lots of time, 3 minutes each, and then move on. Well, we can't give everyone an hour each, okay? But over time.
You can yield like they do in Congress.
There's nobody to yield because we're done with the public comment. So, Mary, we're going to move on.
Okay, I've said a lot of
appreciate
things
it.
that were very important. I hope you listen to them.
Well, listening to
No,
notes.
I'm glad you wrote notes. It's
Yeah.
good.
Thank you, everyone. And actually, what Mary said reminded me of something else I wanted to point out that Ross will point out at the end of the meeting, which is actually at our next meeting is going to be at the South LA shelter. Okay. And I think we all feel it's very important that all of the city shelters serve all of the communities, even the underserved communities. So I think it's important that we have a South LA shelter where it's at, and I hope people recognize that and appreciate that as well. We should move on to the agenda.
I'd just like to say quickly that I want to thank everybody for coming and for taking the time off to be here, and especially the people in the rescue community. Every morning when I wake up and I see my dog, I'm grateful for the work that you people do. And you've had such a hand in the happiness of me and my fiance and my family. I'm honored by what you do, and we're all so excited to see this room full and to see you all involved and participating. And we're really listening. Thank you.
Second item is commission business, approval of the minutes for the meeting of February 25.
And just to point that out, Mr. LaSalle, that was the clarification that the motion to adopt the new hope policy was, the motion was to adopt it, but as amended, to state that the commission was providing a full or partial waiver of the adoption fees to achieve the results set out in the new hope program.
Yes, and that would make it consistent with LAMC 53.11 that you have that for.
Okay. Any discussion or comments about the minutes, about the change or anything else in the minutes?
I move we adopt the minutes.
I second it.
Here.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion was passed by those commissioners present.
Actually, it would show that it would be adopted by the commission 5-0.
5-0.
A minute question. So the minutes from last meeting.
Those were gonna be at the next meeting agenda. They just
You'll probably get 2 sets at the next meeting.
Yeah. Okay.
Division on the CPR. 3 discussion items. A, discussion item on biodegradable dog waste bags. This was proposed by Commissioner Wolfson.
And do we have, is Commissioner Wolfson going to present, or do we have staff?
I think it's just a discussion.
What inspired me was just the thought of the fact that you're taking something that's so fundamentally disposable and replacing it in a container that's going to potentially keep it for thousands of years. Just, it's always felt to me to be kind of crazy. And then I looked on and I found out that you could get them, and they're not disposable bags that are actually biodegradable, and they don't even cost that much more money. And I thought that they would probably cost even less if there was a requirement that we have to use biodegradable dog bags. And so I just asked Brenda if she would present us some options and talk about what it would take to get that type of a policy passed.
Right, and I think in our preliminary conversations,
I think this dovetails quite nicely with the plastic bag ordinance that's already in the city, and it's something that would be relatively easy to tag onto, and I'm very happy to talk to members of the PAW committee and try to move that forward if the commission wants us to do that.
And when you say that, I'm just so I understand the scope of this, is this something that we're requiring, the city to use, or this would be an ordinance that would apply to the public?
My initial inspiration would be the same way that in the city of Los Angeles there are now requirements citywide related to plastic bags. That it would be the same with little doggy bags.
And so this would, I'm just trying to think it through, and I think it may get fleshed out more in your discussions and consideration. So would this be an ordinance that would require that any dog waste bags that are sold in the city be biodegradable?
Yeah.
To flesh this out, I think probably the best approach would be for staff to bring a board report with suggestions to the commission where you can fully discuss it, and then approve a direction that would then go to the city council for their appropriate action. And it probably should be kept separate from plastic bags, which have their own issues and apply in some cases and don't apply in other cases, where this is a much cleaner, sort of self-sufficient concept.
Thanks, Dov. Yeah.
We're happy to work on that report and bring it back, probably not at the next commission meeting, but the one after that.
That's a great time frame. Thank you, Brenda.
Any other comments from other commissioners? Or?
I think it's a great idea.
Thank you.
Can I do a comment on it?
Yeah.
All right.
We get to do public comment on discussion items, right?
Mm-hmm. You want to do a comment on this, Mary?
Yes.
Okay.
Remember, I'll just remind people to state your name, where you're from, and discuss. Public comment on discussion items should be related to the item at issue. And you get 2 minutes each.
Uh-oh. Can't sneak anything else.
It used to be 1 minute.
Can I sneak anything else? Can I sneak anything else? No, right? Right? Not gonna do it?
You can sneak in some humor.
Okay, Mary Catalano, you came up with this.
Yeah.
God bless you. Good idea.
Thank you.
The problem is, by the way, for a million years, because I'm such a wonderful person, I've been using newspaper or paper. I never use plastic because paper will break down. Newspaper will break down. I actually use, and it's terrible, I actually go to fast food places sometimes, and I have to use those leftover ones to pick up my dog poop. And I've never used plastic. And I agree with you, and there are available, but you can't enforce the spay and neuter laws. So how are you going to do this?
I don't know that. Doug, remind us about first. I just want to make it clear for all of us.
Since this is in fact on the agenda, yes, it can be discussed.
Yeah. No, I just actually, Mary, my thinking about it was that no, it's not a. It's a response. It's not a necessarily.
And I love you for it because it's a great. It's good.
Right, but I don't know. Actually, before you begin, does that mean that we get to get into a back and forth discussion? I got criticized after the last meeting.
Okay, so
since
this item is on the agenda, you can actually, Mary, 1 second, you can actually discuss, go back and forth, take as much time as you want.
Well, I'm not suggesting that we take the whole day on this, but I just want to say that my thinking is similar to the line of general enforcement, which is that it's not just focusing on if this rule were in place, the idea is that then you can enforce it at pet stores and the places that sell the bags.
Fantastic.
Right. So I mean, I think to actually enforce it on the level of the individuals is much more challenging. But also, what I'm always thinking about ways we can enforce laws at the business level and not necessarily at the individual level.
it's just the biggest waste when you have any, I mean, first of all, we shouldn't be having plastic bags anyway, but they're giant plastic bags, and they're used for once to pick up poop, and then they're in the landfill for the end of time, so.
Understand that the commission can discuss for as long as it wants.
I see, but then, right. it's
Then
not
the
a-
public is normally limited to what your rules say unless you want to waive them and increase them.
Or give a very specific targeted question for somebody. Yeah, I think.
So that was my intent to be a response. I responded, and just in general, we're always looking for ways that we can enforce a whole plethora of enforcement options. And one of the requests that has been made of the department that we're also looking forward to getting a report on is what are our options in terms of enforcement in general? You know, what are the rules that we can apply, and we're looking forward to that report, because I think there are some on the books and the creative ways that we may do it, and it'll be an agenda item, and it'll be presented in advance, and we'll all get a chance to talk about it.
We have one more speaker card.
On this topic? Yeah.
On this
Okay.
topic. You bet.
Yvette Burke, and I'm going to change title now, Adapt Add Specialty. As one of the providers to the City of Los Angeles of your poop bag program that goes to the city, we do provide you the biodegradable bags for your parks and programs, but a clear understanding needs to be made of what biodegradable means. It could be a corn-based or a potato-based starch in the bag, or a polymer that's soy-based. But in a landfill, it still won't break down. That's why paper is better. The polymers can last 100 years, even a biodegradable polymer. It requires a biologic response of air, water, sunlight to break that bag down. So, pooping on my own business, I sell you those bags with the disclaimer. I've provided the reports on that to the city. But unless it is in a condition where it can break down, it doesn't matter if you regulate it. It does matter in terms of what those bags contain that actually have hazardous materials that are coming in from foreign countries. Those that have lead-based material, that have other types of materials in the polymer that leachate into your landfills and into your water supply. So it's not just about the bag, it's about what the bag is made of.
I'm good. Any further discussion?
Item 3, item 4, actually, board report, change to barking dog noise requirements.
Morning, Commissioners. John Chavez with Animal Services. We're recommending a couple of changes to the barking dog requirements. We had previously amended the municipal code back in 2011 to better define what made up excessive dog noise. And in the municipal code today, excessive dog noise is defined as continuously audible for 10 minutes or intermittently audible for 30 minutes within a 3-hour period. We found that this definition has proven to be a problem for us. It's limiting our department from effectively addressing complaints regarding excessive dog barking. We've had a very experienced animal hearing staff person consult with Ross, who is the head of our hearings unit, as well as our city attorney. And she and we all agree that eliminating this language will not affect us from effectively adjudicating dog hearing cases in the future. We did include the draft language as part of the attachment. That's change number 1. Change number 2 is having to do when the second complaint letter can be filed. There's language in there that's erroneous that requires that the second complaint be received within 15 days of a written notice to the dog owner. We're recommending that the correct time be that the second complaint must be filed after 15 days from issuance of the written notice. So we're requesting, recommending that these changes be adopted and seeking your vote.
Thank you. This came up recently, I think at the February 25th
Yes.
meeting, and I really appreciate the quick attention to it. I think people who were at that meeting and the meeting after saw how much I struggled with trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. That was maybe my own personal struggle. I know the commission, other commissioners were able to make that, to meet that geometry challenge, but I wasn't. And more generally, having the time requirements as an absolute requirement, I think, doesn't take into consideration situations where you can have a situation where there's a barking dog and it isn't 10 minutes continuous. It doesn't fit the intermittent definition, even if it's clear how to kind of track that, but people are still getting woken up in the middle of the night, having a hard time sleeping, and it doesn't take into account the loudness of the barking. On the other hand, there are situations where there's some sort of neighbor dispute or somebody just doesn't like animals and they may be trying to leverage the ordinance for other purposes, which is a concern. But I don't see how the time requirement really addresses that situation anyways. Those are just kind of some of my thoughts. The second change seems like it was just correcting a typo or something, so that doesn't seem so controversial. But I'd like to get other, obviously, open it up for other commissioners.
Maybe if we can have public testimony and then we can discuss the item a little bit.
Happy to do that unless anybody else wants to speak first.
I mean, I want to talk about it.
We have two public comments, Phyllis and Terry. Want to come up? Phyllis first, of course.
I'm Phyllis, starting the animal issues. I just want to let you know, the barking dogs was a really big thing a few years ago when they started passing specific laws. And so we did a lot of study on it with animal people, which has access, of course, nationwide, worldwide. And what we did find is that regardless of how the ordinance was written, if it was actually valid, was carried through, or how it was determined, the courts almost always uphold this. Generally, the person that goes all the way through hearings on this does have some legitimate issue. And the thing from a personal basis is that we need to free up our officers more so that they have time to go out and just take a look at these locations, because generally there's something wrong with the animal. And we need to be sure that there's not a humane violation. That can be done very easily, and that gives them, and this gives them cause. I mean, this gives them the ability to go in. There has been a complaint, so they don't have to get the warrant to go in unless the people won't let them in. Also, this is something where administrative citations can be used, and there's a lot of talk about, oh, if we just had the parking done. This is all perfected. I can bring you forms from a dozen agencies. We have written this for the city. It's on the books. Administrative citations work great because when people have to pay money, it comes out of their pocket. This is a chance to see if the animals are spayed or neutered. Now, all of this can go together. So we need to be smart about enforcement, and we need to use these administrative citations. And they should not be starting at more than $100. They have them at $250. Code enforcement can help with this. Code enforcement is one of our biggest assets, and we need to use it. As you know, the barking dog hearings have been suspended, and there's another thing. The dangerous dogs now are only being reported to the department on a form. When you call in and say there's a dangerous dog in my community, you're being told to make out a form. So I think you should look and see it, how this is all happening and how it fits together.
Foundation. My concern with this is the length of time that you're asking about consistent barking. I'm worried on it because once it becomes a law and once it's written down, it will be the letter of the law. And so non-consistent barking but stretched over a half-hour time, I don't know how you're going to judge that if somebody isn't taping the animal. I mean, is it consistent if it's 5 barks within a half hour? I mean, what is consistent barking? You know, I'm just worried about that.
Just to clarify, we're talking about taking out that requirement.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, so there's no okay, then I must have misread it, because my concern was that when I've sat through so many of these trials, and very often, I say the majority of the time, it's two neighbors who don't like each other and are looking for ways to get at each other, because if there was a real problem, you'd have more than one neighbor. And in this instance where we've had several neighbors come down, or if they can't come down, they write a letter or something, then you often do have an issue. And Phyllis is right, a visit to the home can often solve a problem. But so many times you can just see that people hate each other. And this is the way that they're getting back at each other, is through the dogs. And I hate for a dog to lose its home because of the people.
Thank you, Jerry, and also Phyllis. Just to clarify, so the way the ordinance would read now, it would be the same that it used to be, or that it was, if this change goes through, the way that it will read is the same that it currently reads. It reads, for purposes of this section, the term excessive noise shall mean noise which is unreasonably annoying, disturbing, offensive, or which unreasonably interferes with the comfortable enjoyment of life or property of one or more persons occupying property in the community or neighborhood within reasonable proximity to the property where the dog or dogs are kept. Currently, there's an additional sentence that says that this also, basically the term excessive noise also requires that it fits into those two time criteria, one of which is 10 minutes of continuous barking or 30 minutes.
Or 30 minutes within 3 hours.
Within 3 hours. And we're talking about taking that out because we think that's just a really difficult thing to show. It's not workable.
So maybe you can explain how it would work, where there would be a violation?
Currently, well, under the new ordinance, a violation would be anybody who is disturbed by their neighbors or a barking dog. Currently, the dog had to bark for a certain amount of time. Under the new ordinance, it basically goes back to the old section where anybody who is disturbed, and people have a different level of tolerance for a barking dog, crying baby, whatever. And this allows everybody to put in their complaint or request a hearing or have the problem solved.
Ross, you handle the appeals, right? You also have knowledge of how the complaints work. One of the things I'm wondering is, out of the number of times there's a complaint, how many of those typically, and this may not be something you can answer now, but I'd be interested in, get resolved before it ever goes to a hearing? Is it like, the vast majority of times there's a complaint, once the process gets started, we're able to work out a solution without ever having to impose an order? Is that right?
Yeah, the way the process works is you put in a written complaint and the department will send out a letter to the address saying a complaint's being made against your dog, please take steps to keep it, keep the barking to a minimum, or we try that. If after 15 days there's another complaint, then the shelter can send it to a hearing. We have approximately, and this is just off the top of my head, about 100, 150 hearings a year. Now that includes dangerous animals and barking dogs. So a majority of them are solved just by a letter being sent out or one neighbor getting together and say, I didn't know my dog was barking, I'll do something about it. Move it to the other side of the house, or take whatever steps are necessary. So most of them are, adjudicated or solved at the local level. It's only when there could be a neighborhood dispute and it has nothing to do with the dog that will get down to us.
Or there's a real issue here.
Or it's a real issue.
So that's pretty consistent with what I observe in regards to housing code violations and dealing with landlords, is that in most cases you have landlords, once they're cited, they will comply. But there's a small percentage that don't. And I think in the situation where we have here, That's what we're looking at, and there's two issues. There's our neighbor just not liking each other, and clearly we don't want to go after the dog and get into that dispute. But on the other hand, there's a real significant problem with barking dogs. I can't tell you, that was the biggest issue when I was appointed to this commission. I've had people, congratulations, can you do something about the barking dog that wakes me up at 3 in the morning? And we've already seen a couple of cases where there's real issues there. And what I'd like to do is see if we can narrow it down to really deal with those issues. Because and there's two issues within that. If you have a barking dog, number one, you're impeding on the quiet enjoyment of the neighbor and making their lives miserable. But also, if you have a dog that's whining consistently, then that dog is being neglected, and there's some issues there as well. So, and I've noticed, this has been going on for years and years, and it's a bigger issue than we even probably know. And I'm a little concerned that this, on one hand, that this came up so fast, but I think that we do need to look at it and open it up more to get more. Because I think there's a couple of issues looking at this change. I don't think this change deals with everything involved that we should be talking about. One of the issues, it has to do with the time period. And from what I can see, and again, I'm looking at the cases where there's a real problem with a barking dog that's driving someone nuts and the dog is out there barking. It could take years. Years. I mean, we've seen that already. There's no clear-cut timeline from what I could see in the ordinance on how long this might take. And I think we owe it to both sides to have some timelines there. And also to educate people on when this happens, what are you in for? And so I don't know if there's public information. When someone calls the department and says I have a barking dog, do you refer them to the ordinance because for a layperson, it's hard to figure out, or is there a public document that's public friendly that says that you got to take this step, this step, this step? Can you do it online? It's not clear if you can file that complaint online, but I think it should be accessible. But I think the key to, and then there's the issue of the fines. And I understood that one ordinance that was supposed to go into effect in 2012 had a scale. The first offense was $100, the second offense is $250, the third offense is $1,000. These are some deterrents to take that could help solve the situation. And whether or not we stress the thing where there is barking dog, we do education with the owner for training. I think these are the steps we need to look at it wholly, but not dismiss it as, well, it's a neighbor-on-neighbor issue. In some cases it might be, but I'm more concerned about going after the real issues here, where there is a barking dog, where it disturbs the neighbor, and there may be some threat to the actual dog that's being neglected and shouldn't be barking that long. And so there's a way, whether it's today or looking that we need to keep this on the agenda to open this up to look at these issues as down the road, not too far down the road, I hope. But I think that that's where I would like to go, and maybe if the city attorney can give us a little history on where we are with the fines and all of
First off, the agenda item is fairly specific to this item. And I would point out that this item really does stand on its own. These were changes that were thought that would make some of these issues move faster, but in fact they've proven to be more of an impediment for people complaining about barking dogs rather than help. So my suggestion to the commission would be that this item be treated as it's written on the agenda. This is here in front of you to make these minimal changes to allow the process to work better, at least this part of the process. The other matter that you raised is something that needs to be looked at, and I would simply suggest that it be put on the agenda to deal with the times, the neighbor disputes, whether the dog is in distress, some of these other things that would require a much broader discussion and ideas about how to make the system both faster and more efficacious.
And if I could just add, when we do get a barking dog call, an officer does go out to try to see if they can hear the dog, if they knock on the door, if they can get in to find out if the dog is in distress. At that time, they do check for licenses and find out if they're spayed and neutered.
So I'm fine with that, dealing with this, as long as if we could maybe even set a specific date in the future where people know we're going to be discussing this item, so we don't get this up on Friday, that we discuss it on Tuesday, to enable the public to come out and maybe limit the agenda, or maybe even do a public hearing on this specific item. But I think it's an issue that impacts a lot of people in a lot of different ways, and we have a responsibility to address it and make sure we have this ordinance on the books. We need to make sure that it works, and it works in everybody's favor, including the dogs. We want to protect the dogs, but we want to protect also the quiet enjoyment of the neighbors that are impacted where there may be distressed barking dogs. So we do that.
I'm not really comfortable with the change, honestly, because I do obviously, I'm concerned if there's an animal that's barking because it's in pain or it's not getting the attention that it needs. And at the same time, I just feel that it's really very vague and very subjective to decide what excessive noise is. I think that the amount of work that we've seen from some of the cases with the barking dog complaints has really been excessive. And I agree that there is a change that's needed. I don't think that this is the change that I'm comfortable with, because I just feel that it's too much of an opportunity for people to use excessive noise too subjectively. I mean, this is just personally speaking, my dogs, I have this rural super highway that goes to my backyard, and there's barking that occurs, and I also have neighbors that have lots of children, and let me tell you, if I could fill it out and take a little note to complain about their children's noises, I would, because I just think that there's an opportunity for changing the verbiage, because I do think, for example, in the case of Mr. Gasanta, he certainly showed that there was a problem, and he showed it to a degree, and at the same time, I think that excessive noise is just an opportunity for somebody to use that. And excessive noise could be somebody being very sensitive to things that are not reasonable, and if an officer comes out, you have no way of controlling what other people consider excessive noise. I don't know if it's a situation where multiple neighbors have to complain about it. If you're in an apartment and a neighbor next to you on either side both agree that there's an excessive noise issue, and that to me is more of a basis for a complaint than if there is, as Terry alluded to, a human issue rather than a neighbor issue.
So, I mean, I think we should explore how we define it. In regards to, and that was another point I wanted to bring up, is in regards to having another witness. And sometimes that's difficult. In fact, in the case that we heard, there was the issue that the dog was under their window. They were on the corner, and the dog was the farthest away from any of their neighbors. And so none of the other neighbors would have been impacted like those the complainants. So I think we need to be aware of that. But so I guess the question is, if someone files a complaint under this ordinance, how do you look at excessive? It's like anything, and then how does the hearing officer then proceed as far as determining what excessive noise is?
The hearing officer is a captain with many years of experience, and he uses his expertise gained over those years to adjudicate fairly. In most cases, for a while, we were hearing cases within 30 days of them being filed with the hearing officer. That has increased somewhat, and we're working on getting that back to 30 days. Once it goes to a hearing, each party is sworn in and, as in court, required to tell the truth. In many cases, the truth is kind of subjective, but we take everybody at their word. And the barking, as I've said, is different levels for different people. We tried we changed it to a time frame, and that didn't work because it was too broad. By bringing it back to the person being impacted, everybody gets a fair hearing, and if they find there is barking, then they get terms and conditions. The dog can get training, the dog has to wear a bark collar, and there's a whole list, 25 or 30 terms and conditions. The dog has to be kept on another side of the yard. So the problem is, in most cases, in about 90% of the cases, the problem is solved. If the dog owner doesn't agree with that, he can always file a petition to have it heard before the board. So it's a fairly lengthy process, but it does ultimately solve the problem one way or another.
I have some more questions, but I don't want to, there are some commissioners who haven't spoken, so I want to make sure that everybody gets heard.
I actually have similar concerns as Commissioner Brent, but I look at it a little bit differently. I mean, as a lawyer, I know that there's legal color to a lot of these words here that have established precedent and established concepts. At the end of the day, what Ross is saying is it feels to me like it's a very humane procedure where a lot of people are involved and nothing's being done arbitrarily. I think that time limits is just an attempt to try and impose some sort of a structure on it that I don't think it really works. I don't think it's been successful. So I think just really making the language as clear as possible, using the word unreasonable a lot, and having a human process with a lot of people involved leads to the greatest amount of fair results. So I'm actually comfortable with this language, and I would vote for it.
Yeah, I agree. I think, like Ross said, a lot of these cases are solved 90% of the time with just a letter. And I think, my mother's actually suffering from a barking dog case. This dog barks continuously for hours, starting at 2 a.m. to about 5 a.m. Woman goes to work and she puts her dog out at night, and there's raccoons, and it's multiple people. What I do like is maybe creating a system where there's multiple people have to submit a letter, like if there's neighbors, because what's happening at my mother's house is there's like all the neighbors behind that house are livid. And so I've tried to explain, okay, you gotta call the shelter, you gotta file, but it's affecting multiple people. So that might be one of the only things I would like to add, is that, your case is stronger if you have, other witnesses add to it. And I think that does happen right now.
It's in
Yeah, it's in it. So
in a hearing, when people call up and say, what evidence do I need, I always say that your best evidence is somebody else in the chair next to you. Some of the evidence is they can videotape the dog. However, the mere fact of putting the camera over the fence could cause dog to bark. A log is just an inanimate type process, and the dog owner is going to say, well, that wasn't my dog barking. But if you have somebody in the chair next to you, that's the best evidence you could get.
Right. And I would agree it makes your case stronger. My concern was that it shouldn't be dependent on having another person, because there are situations where it would only impact one person. But clearly, if you have more people raising, that's proof that there is a problem.
And another problem is there are neighborhoods in the city where the owner of the dog doesn't have a sterling reputation and nobody wants to question whether his dog's barking or not.
So I'm okay with the changes.
I had a couple of comments or questions. One, about the second change, which I think, again, was correcting a typo. So the second change, I think, is in subsection B1 of section 5363, and it's changing it to that the second complaint has to come after 15 days. I think the intent there is you got to give the owner a chance to comply. Right. So you can't just turn around, make one complaint, make another complaint a week later. One question I have is whether we want to have a back-end time limit so that once somebody files one complaint, they can't come back in 10 months and say, file the second complaint and trigger a hearing. I don't know if that happens, but I wonder if you want to say if after 15 days there's a second complaint, any such second complaint has to be made within, say, 120 days or something like that.
We've looked at that, and the problem is that, as Ross said, it is oftentimes better to leave it to the discretion of the hearing examiners who have experience, and in some cases, if they feel that sufficient time has gone by, that you have to start all over again, that's what they do. There are other times where if you're going to have an arbitrary date, which is what virtually any date boils down to be, as soon as people understand that, there's also the potential for people to go, well, there is a little bit of barking, it's not bad, but if I wait past 120 days, I'm going to have to go back to 0, so I'm going to put in a second complaint now. It really, we've had many discussions with different staff at the department, and the feeling of staff and my office is that the changes that were recommended here would work the best, would serve the greatest community on both sides.
Thank you. And then on the language that we would be left with, I think it is obviously subject to interpretation. We're relying on the captain's experience in assessing the situation and reviewing the testimony. But it also is, as Roger pointed out, very similar to the language in the nuisance statute that judges and juries have to look at, what is unreasonable interference with comfortable enjoyment of life and property. And I don't think we can ever come up with a list of these are the very firm criteria, requiring everybody to go out and get noise meters or, think of every possible situation where dog barking can become a problem for someone's ability to sleep or enjoy their house. So I'm comfortable relying on the experience of the captains who have been around. I don't think there's any way around it, and I think they probably do a good job and do their best. I don't know if it's for this or it's for a future agenda item, but I've heard that there used to be a different system in place many years ago, where there was like a mediation system where we had mediators and dog trainers. And so I just wanted to flag that as something that I've become aware of that existed in the past and maybe is worth bringing up for that future agenda item, just to hear how that went and why it went away.
The way a barking dog works, when you put in a complaint, we send an officer, post a letter. If after 15 days you have we have a mediation at the shelter that has no force of law. Both sides are invited in to the shelter to discuss the problem. A lot of times it's solved right there. If it's not solved, then it goes to an administrative hearing, which does have the force of law because it's in the Muni Code.
Right. But so was there in the past a situation where dog trainers also got involved in that system?
That was through the city attorney's office. The city attorney had a program. Okay. We invited people to attend that. The problem was both sides had to agree, and oftentimes the one side or the other didn't agree.
Now, sometimes now when there is a barking dog and we decide to reissue the license and we give terms and conditions, one of the terms and conditions can be to get a trainer.
Right.
I had a question on the first notice. So there's no time. Is there a standard procedure when the department writes the notice to the owner after receiving a complaint? Because it's not in the ordinance as far as.
Could you repeat that question?
How quickly the department responds to the complaint by sending out a notice?
I think that depends on the workload of the shelter and staffing. That would be up to the captain at the shelter and field operations. Normally, they would put it on their to-do list and they get out as quickly as possible, I'm sure, but I can't speak for how long it takes in every case.
So would it be appropriate to set some parameters?
Well, I think what we might want to do is bring some field staff in to answer the question. Because I think that's something that they're tracking right now as part of our trying to meet some of the mayor's initiatives.
So maybe we can have an agenda item where we do that and address some of these other questions that have been raised.
Right. So the idea would be to set some date in the future where we're going to address this so people know. I mean, we don't have to do it today.
Well, I'm tempted to make it the next meeting just because we'll be out in a community, and but I'm not sure that that makes sense for other reasons. But we'll be out in the community, and it's been my experience that as bad as the occasional dog might be in the area where I live, there are. I mean, I used to live in an area where, I mean, it was like hearing a wave coming in, hearing the dogs in the distance barking, and the dogs closer barking, and the dogs right in your area, and I bet this impacts a lot of people in other communities of Buffalo. And it'd be interesting to hear what people in South LA or the areas where there are a lot more dogs that are out and doing a lot of this barking would say about what they would like to see done. But I don't think if we make it the next meeting, we would have time to look at some of these. To bring some of the information back to the commission.
Right. Maybe at the next meeting, we can come in with a proposal for what date we would have this meeting.
There is a public meeting, I believe, in June, where if you brought this up in the out in the suburbs, you might get a lot more response.
Which shelter is that going to be at?
I don't know, I just remember when I looked it up, it's somewhere toward the beginning of the summer.
Yeah.
West LA
Is it?
But yeah, and we might want to consider not just making it accessible for various communities to input, so we might want to have that input in a number of agenda to ensure that we get adequate input. Because I do think this is a big issue for a lot of people, and our responsibility to respond to these issues is really important. So I'm prepared to move this.
Before you vote, we've garnered 5 additional.
We had our public meeting.
Why don't we? We're kind of. Why don't we allow those because maybe the expectations I set up weren't very clear. But in general, on these agenda items, I think it'd be better if people get their cards in before the agenda item starts.
Okay.
But in this case, because I think in the past we've allowed comment cards to come in during the discussion, why don't we allow those 5 speakers?
So you want to hear them?
Yeah.
You want to limit it to 1 minute?
Let's do 2 minutes, but I anticipate that people will endeavor to take less time.
Mary and Carol Davis. Mary Catalano. Carol Davis.
So Mary will go first.
And how many cards do we have?
5.
Carol's up first, so.
Mary, you want to go? There you go. Okay. I'll make it really quick. I was going to say we could knock out a lot of these barking dog situations if we enforce spay, neuter, and go after the breeders. That'll knock it out in about half, at least.
That's fine. Let's stick to the agendized item,
Yeah.
please.
I agree with Commissioner Brent. I really do. I really agree with you, and I think that it's very subjective. And I agree with Terry Austin that a lot of neighbors have a lot of complaints about a lot of things, and it's really subjective, and you're absolutely right, like you said. And I think that the commission ought to really listen to what you said, because it gives the opportunity for all kinds of problems. Secondly, the terms and conditions that General Manager Barnette mentioned is a good idea, but I suggest that you look at terms and conditions that include spay neuter, that include your breeding license and all of that. So if you do have an opportunity to get into one of those houses where there's a complaint,
They are included.
Yeah.
yeah, and second, and lastly, the department isn't doing anything about dangerous dogs, and that's much more of a problem. I'm glad you're spending a lot of time on barking, but there are dangerous dogs out there, and I know of a case that's just this week. People have to fill out a form, they have to call and get another form.
We have to stick to the agenda on this item. I appreciate it.
But dangerous dogs are more important than barking.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Mary, and who's next? Who's after Mary?
Some of my comment was actually answered. Oh, yes.
Mary.
Okay. No, I just wanted to make sure that, and I believe that Brenda did mention that when they go out to the house, they do check for spaying and neutering on the animals. And if they're not spayed or neutered, do they cite them? Do they make them get them fixed before they come back and recheck for the barking complaint? Because I think that it has a lot to do with the aggression of the animal, the spaying or neutering, the female dogs being in heat, all that sort of thing really has an effect on their behavior. I think that really makes a lot of sense. And what is the time, what is the time frame between those two actions? Because the dog would probably calm down if it's fixed and may not bark as much and not be, because I know I know about cats and they're bitchier than the dogs. Anyway, what else? Also, I believe that it's probably case-by-case basis would be great because it's a neighbor problem. It could be a neighbor that just hates other neighbors or hates animals altogether, which is a terrible thing. And just the consideration of the time frame between whether or not the animals are fixed and also how many animals, which of course will be determined by hopefully the visit. Thank you.
Thank you. Laurel Kinder and Brenda Foster.
I think dogs should be allowed to bark during the day, and this should be limited to the nighttime, like a curfew of 10 o'clock after. I've had several cases I've even been reported. One house I lived in for 3 years and didn't have a problem with barking dogs until my son started playing country music in the garage. My foster kicked someone out of a room because he was growing marijuana in the room, and she was reported as an animal abuser. So people use this kind of thing for every other problem. So if we eliminated the daytime reporting, dogs should be able to bark. At night, they should be in the house. So maybe limit it to an evening till morning situation.
I would just be interested in how you deal with the situation. I used to have a job at work, the night shift, and I had to sleep during the day. I'm just curious if you have any thoughts about that, because I think everybody in the city should be entitled to quiet enjoyment.
That you would ask me that, because I had a woman who was medicated and all kinds of medications and slept during the day. So my dog barked once, it woke her up. So that I kind of feel isn't my responsibility in a sense, because I can't do anything about a dog barking once, because if your window's close to their window and it barks once, it is going to wake them up. So
what if they're barking all day because somebody's at work?
Well, I mean, it would have to be so excessive, but I think that I've been in these rooms for 20 years and watched the type of people that are reporting. Generally, it's just them. And they seem to be just kind of that kind of person that anything bothers them. So these dogs should be able to bark during the day.
Interesting proposal.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Brenda Foster from Studio City. I came down here today to support the spay neuter enforcement and fight the factory breeding, but I have a comment on the barking dogs. In our case, personally, it's been a dysfunctional system in that, to our knowledge, all we ever got was a notice sent to the dog's family, and no officer was ever sent to check conditions. And I feel for that dog. I care more about the dog than anything else. And my husband says that basically so far it's just addressing temporary compliance is what they do. They get better for a little bit and then it gets worse, and we would just have to put in a first complaint over and over again. They get better a little bit, but in the end, I feel like no one loves that animal. And I kind of want to break into their yard and walk their dog for them and love their dog because the animal's getting neglected. But I guess thanks for listening to my feedback, and just overall, I think we're here because we love animals and we want to do right by them. So
Thank you.
thanks a lot.
Ann Hager.
It's the last comment.
That one.
Hello, thank you. My name is Ann Hager. I'm from Studio City. I want to thank Commissioner Gross for bringing up the issue of neglect when it comes to the issue of dog barking. I think that's important to address, and you had mentioned training as well, and I think that it is necessary in mitigating dog barking, but no amount of training helps a dog who's intact, for one thing, and also it doesn't help a dog who is locked out of his or her home. Dogs are diurnal social pack animals, and they need to be brought in the home at night. So I don't know if that is ever something that could be mandated, but that's imperative. Dogs can't be made into, quote, guard dogs. And I think if ever possible, that needs to be enforced. Also, as part of the ordinance, I think there needs to be a distinction made between houses with yards and apartments. I think maybe as far as noise in apartment buildings, they're maybe a little less stringent, because as it is, having pets, dogs or cats, but especially dogs, apartment managers and owners are already very strict about owning a dog, and I think people are less inclined to adopt because they aren't allowed animals. So I think that might make it harder for people, knowing that they'll be reported for noise. So it's just something to consider. Anyway, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Indeed, another issue to deal with as far as adopting adoptions in apartments, which we need to figure out a way to encourage.
Are you speaking of adopting apartments, or?
Can do that as well.
I think Larry would do that in some cases if he could. And improve. Okay, so thank you, everyone, and I hope I didn't ask anything too pointed, Laurel. I just those thoughts just occurred to me as you were bringing up that idea. So we, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to adopt the proposal.
I would second it.
Who's the second?
Commissioner Zaft.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Nay.
Opposed?
Nay.
The motion passed 4-1 with Commissioner Brent in opposition.
And just to clarify, now this will go where to next? Paul.
The department will forward this to the mayor and the city council, and the city council will send it to the department.
Okay, so it goes first to the city council, then to Paul.
Right, it's all matters go to the city council then directs it to the appropriate committee.
Technically, the first step, though, is we send it to the mayor's office, and then they release it for PAW committee. But Doug's right, it will end up going to PAW committee.
The next time the public will see this would be at the PAW committee?
That's correct.
Okay.
And then we'll look towards discussing a possible date at our next meeting.
That sounds great. We have one more item, then we have the general manager's report.
We also have board report requesting proposal for the annual.
That's what I'm saying, we have one more item, right? The RFP for software, and then we have the general manager's report. Why don't I propose a 5-minute break? That means we'll take a 10-minute break, and we'll be back at 10 a.m.
The Animal Services Commission is back in session. After a short break, all the commissioners are present. We have a quorum. Next item on the agenda is a board report request for proposal for an animal management system.
Animal Services uses as animal management system a program called Chameleon. And this animal management system captures all the information on a particular animal from intake to the ultimate outcome. It's extremely important to us It captures also donation information and captures all the revenue that we receive via adoptions. And one of the things it does for us too is it provides us with important reporting information. So as an example, the wolf stat report that you get on a monthly basis is derived from that particular animal management software. We've had a contract with HLP, the makers of Chameleon, since 2000. So after 14 years with the same organization, we all know that technology changes pretty rapidly. So we thought that it would be a good idea to look and see if there was other software out there that might be more effective, more efficient, maybe even more cost effective for the department. So about a year and a half ago, we presented an RFP for this animal management software, for the issuance of the software. I should add that we even worked closely with ITA to have them take a look at this RFP to make sure that it was that it met the city's short and long-term needs, because they're doing a lot of things with 311 and with mobile apps and so forth. So we did do that, and we developed the RFP that's in front of you. Where we got hung up at the board meeting a year and a half ago was on the makeup of the panel. There was a lot of discussion regarding who should be on that panel, internal versus external people, the number of people on that panel. Our position is that that's a procedural question. It's really something under the purview of the department and the general manager on selection of a panel. And we will have people that represent various sections of our department, from medical, shelter staff, field staff, our systems person, someone from administration, and someone from the IT department, and some other external departments. So we wind up having a pretty broad panel that will look at this RFP and make the best recommendations they can. So,
one outside.
yes. In addition to the ITA, we would have an external person outside city government. So the policy question, as we see it before the commission today, is the authority to allow the department to let an RFP, and then we would be coming back like we always do with recommendations on a final contractor.
You said this is originally 2 years ago, and then a year and a half ago.
We probably submitted this about 3 times total for the commission. The last time was about a year and a half ago.
It was at the September 5th, 2012 meeting, and I included a copy of the minutes in your binder and an email to you, I believe yesterday.
Okay. And it was, I think it was originally brought up like in April 2012, and there was some discussion about getting, is it ITA?
Yes, that's correct. Information technology is correct.
Right, to weigh in on our RFP, and then revise our RFP was brought in September.
That's correct.
The one thing I would say, John, just to be clear, is that of the companies that would be qualified to bid on an agency the size of Los Angeles Animal Services, there are only 3 or 4 of them, and one of them would be our current vendor. However, what happened when we talked to ITA about the fact that our system was a 2000 system, was they said that, well, even if you upgrade to your latest version, it's like installing all the software and starting over with that product. So it doesn't preclude them from bidding.
Do we have a sense that that upgrade would be kind of in ballpark expense-wise, or whether?
Well, they're one of the more expensive companies, but I think it's, there's so much more other than the cost of the software that comes into play, like how the city has decided to, for example, we have a lot of our information stored on servers within the department, and the money to buy new servers has been denied. We have, 7 servers, and they're all at the end of their lifespan as far as computers go. We sort of patch them together, and the city has not agreed that we should buy new servers, so there'll be a certain level at which the information storage will be on a citywide system. So I mean, there's a whole lot of things at play here that, more than just which box software you get off the shelf.
The other thing I want to add in terms of the cost, Commissioner, is we have some idea, but we're not 100% sure. We did submit for the 2014-15 budget, which is supposed to be coming out fairly soon, after April 20th. Yeah. We did have like a placeholder in there that we want a certain amount of money, but we don't know how accurate that is. We're guessing maybe $100,000. The other really important thing relative to this, we understand that the training that's going to be required of staff would be potentially a significant cost. So part of the reason for going out to bid is really better defining what this ultimate cost will be, so we could either get it next year or budget it for the following year. That's part of the process, because right now we're just assuming what some of these costs are. They may be higher, they might be lower.
So maybe, I realize there was some confusion after the last item. I think in general, we should have some preliminary discussion with commissioners, then open it up for public comment. Get all the public comment in then, and then we can have some follow-up discussion action. Does anyone have any other questions?
Yeah, just one minor thing on the staff report. It says that the board took no action, but indeed they did. It just wasn't followed through. Is that correct?
Yes.
So just on the panel, so what you're proposing, that's normal?
It's normal city protocol. What we're proposing that each one of the user groups have a representative, so that we have a list of here's what we need the system to deliver, and the people who are the users get to participate. So we looked at all of our different divisions, and that's how we came up with who should be on the panel.
Yes, when we look at all the steps needed to do an RFP, selection of the panel is just one of those administrative tasks, one of many. So we strongly believe that's within the purview of the department general manager to make that decision.
Right. And when this came up last time, it was in response to the contract expiring with the current provider. What's happened since then?
Piecemeal it to stay with them.
Yes.
We're still, but we haven't done any upgrades.
And how old is the software?
2000.
Yeah. Hope you don't have the XP.
We handle all
computers
that.
are Commodore 64.
So one thing in the RFP, it said, one of the provisions said the ability to have accounts payable, receivable, and animal licensing modules is highly desirable. Why should that be required?
Because it's been recommended by the city ITA department that we get a box product and that we not have something designed, because that's why we have some of the challenges that we have now with our online licensing and with our vet portal, et cetera, because we've designed those in-house. And so if we can get a box system that has all those components, we'd prefer to do that, because they can probably be fixed by a technician at whoever owns the software. If we can, we'll still have some different systems, but that's just preferable.
And would they continue to provide training? Because I know that's an issue with the website where one person leaves or so.
Well, the website's a little different issue, but yes, that's a big issue, and we're trying to hire someone now who can work on that. But when you have a box product, even the one we have now, if we have special reports, our ITA supervisor can work with the company and get them to write special reports, and we just pay for those reports. But in terms of all the programs, that's the way they are. You can call the company, you can get technical support. They're all that way. We wouldn't go with a company that didn't offer that.
So just on that point, so currently you guys can actually just come up with a customized report and have that produced on your own without interacting with the company, or without the need to depend on the response from the company?
The problem with what we're dealing with now is that the reports are written in Crystal, and there's only one person on our staff who can write a Crystal report. So if that person happens to be out sick, we can't write a report. if we go to the company to get them to write special reports for us, it could get costly and it takes time. You know, mostly we're looking for products that have standardized reports. And I don't even know what this current company has in terms of standard reports if we bought their system all new. I mean, that we have to look at the whole field. I haven't looked at it for several years.
Yeah, that's why initially my remarks were that we're trying to make this process more efficient, to rely essentially on one person to develop reports. It's dangerous. And we just believe that there's now, given how friendly software is, that there's probably just a bunch of canned reports that we can, any manager can print out without having to rely on just one person. So that's.
John and I met the other day with the general manager from ITA just to talk about where's the city going, where's the city going to push us to go, and that's when the storage question came up and was a discussion item, and how we store our data.
One of the things, I'll just be frank, being kind of new to the commission, but having been here, I don't know, 5 or 6 months, most of the time these RFPs come through and there is no discussion about the panel makeup, and so that makes sense to me. But looking back at the minutes from the September 2012 meeting, I just want to make sure I understand what the issues were that the commission was concerned with at that time. And I'm not sure I fully, understand that.
Okay.
Because it just strikes me the commission voted 4-0 to do something. The department disagreed and didn't follow that course of action, and now you're bringing it back to us now. And so I think all of us being new, we need to understand, well, some of us being new, we need to be able to understand kind of what the history was behind it so we can kind of put it in context in order to know how to move forward.
One of the concerns that was raised was, since we were talking about an administrative citation program, that we should wait until we had that program in place so that perhaps there would be a link between our software and the administrative citation program. At that point, the department was proposing that we do a pilot ACE program, and when we took that proposal to the PAW committee, we were lumped in with the police department, and it's gone off in another direction. It's highly likely that if this program continues, ACE program continues the way it's going now, that it will be handled by an outside collection of some sort that's probably not going to relate to our software.
We're still in the middle of that discussion as of this week, and so there hasn't been any final determination. The report that will end up going to City Council will allow the City Council to decide which way they want to go. And so that part is really still up in the air.
But it's probably not going to be individually our department, which is what we had wanted. We went to the PAW committee and said we're ready to launch an ACE program on our own, and it was their preference to put us with LAPD in a system. So, we're still ready to do it on our own. We would love to.
We should have an update on ACE on an upcoming agenda.
That would be something for Mr. Usell.
I think Mr. Usell, you should
John
take
Portland
that back.
and Mark
Take it back to
Salazar.
us.
Well, actually, our committee working on that is Mark Salazar, John Portland, and Doug. So the three of them.
So to clarify then, it's not desired or part of the criteria that we would be looking at when we do an RFP for the software.
No, it's really not. The other, I think one of the other concerns was people didn't understand the cloud. They were concerned that we would be putting information up that would reveal people's private, personal information. It was a lot of misunderstanding about what technology does and doesn't do.
Why did those concerns lead to this discussion about the panel makeup? Like, why does the cloud or the ACE program relate to whatever the commissioners at the time?
Well, the panel that was being recommended was heavily favored one particular software.
No, I'm trying to understand what you mean the commissioners wanted one particular software, or?
I can't speak to that, but it seemed like the panel favored one particular software.
I guess what I was getting back to is I'm trying to understand what the commissioners were thinking at the time, so that we can make an informed decision, and we talked about wanting to have the software taken to be able to work with any sort of administrative citation program that might be set up and issue about data being stored in the cloud.
There are a number of things that our current software don't do that I would like to see a software do. For example, it's not easy to put medical records in on the animals, so I would like to see a module that links, that has medical records, that feeds right into the adoption profile, for example, so when somebody adopts an animal, their medical record prints right out. I mean, I have, my wish list. I'm not particularly interested in having donor information in that particular database. That usually stands separate. Most CPAs want some separation there that I've worked with in the past. We would also like to be able to do the licensing and have it into this box system, which would possibly be an upgrade to the system that we developed for ourselves that we're using now, that does have some limitations. There's just a number of things that and I don't know if it would have an interface with outside vendors like the vet portal or not, but that certainly would be desirable if it did. I mean, these are the kinds of things that we look at. I'm not really, other than just being a simple user, I'm not really an IT person. I probably would sit on this panel. But in terms of knowing what I want the system to do, these would be the things that I think that staff would want to see.
Can I respond to the cloud question? Originally, I think in either our first or second version of the RFP, we were limiting the proposers to be cloud-based. And then there was some objection to just a cloud-based provider. So we eliminated just having cloud-based contractors. So now it's open to a contractor that could do cloud-based or server-based systems for us. We were thinking cloud-based because, well, that's kind of the direction where all this stuff is going, and in the future, that's where it's going to be going as well. So it's open to any organization that does either cloud-based or server-based. That was a recommendation that was put forth by the commission, and our RFP now reflects that it could be anybody.
And I think it's important to look at that. Any security-minded software expert would have issues with the cloud and the ability to keep that secure. So having the ability to look at both ways, I think, is important. But I mean, the fact is that if this software is 14 years old, I mean, clearly we need to. I mean, software only lasts like 2 or 3 years, let alone 14 years. So it seems to make sense that we should be looking at upgrading so we can serve general public better.
Yeah, I probably and Alana are probably the most familiar with Chameleon, and I think we definitely know that it's extremely flawed, and I certainly agree with Commissioner Gross that the necessity exists to replace it. My question is that, are we looking solely at the question of, are we as a commission able to determine the panel, or are we looking at it as in a question of should we proceed with the RFP?
The RFP is before you.
Okay, so the panel discussion is moot?
Well, I had a question. Probably for Doug, like, how does this, so a previous commission made a motion that was approved, it was never acted on. Do we need to kind of rescind, overrule that motion before we?
You would, since that's, one way or another, that's something that you need to deal with. So your action would need to supersede that if you wanted to.
And so would that have to be kind of would that have to be formally done? Like the recommendation needs to be that we rescind or supersede the prior commission's motion?
So in looking at the action, the recommended action, you could take this action and because sending out the RFP is not necessarily dependent on the makeup of the panel. And so instead of continuing this again, since the department probably does need to look at its system sooner rather than later, and you might want to have a discussion about the panel and take that action as a separate issue that's separate from releasing the RFP, since the RFP probably is something that it takes time. And so you will have time to address the issue of the panel. And since that item is not on the agenda, you really aren't in a position today to take an action on the panel, but that doesn't need to, that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to not take an action on what's before you.
So just so I'm clear, this is just to release the RFP, and if we want to visit the issue of the panel makeup, we can, or we don't have to if we don't want to.
Correct. If you don't, I think that the previous action, though,
Would carry.
Old software.
If you don't move around, the lights go off.
Jumping jacks.
Is there a timer? Is there a timer over there?
That's okay, we're all friends here.
Oh, okay.
Well, it looks like number 2 says direct the department to report back, so.
Right, so the department to report back, that would be with the recommended proposal. So that would be after the panel has already made its recommendation to the general manager.
And a panel that the department would like would have somebody from shelter, medical, field, someone from outside the department for IT.
IT, city
And
IT,
outside.
and somebody outside.
That's
7 total?
Yes.
Does anybody have to leave any department?
Oh, I see, department IT and city IT. Is there any other, are there any other questions or discussion before we go to public comment?
Let's go to public comment then.
Okay. 2 minutes each, name and city of residence. And how many speakers do we have?
We have 4. Carol, Davis, and Phyllis. Why not come up and take your seats?
Hi again, Carol Davis, Companion Animal Protection Society. I live in the city of Los Angeles. Commissioner Zaft, what you said was really important about previous commissioners and getting to know what happened, and that's what this is about. I'm going to be reading something from a previous commissioner on this issue. Please first see if you can get upgrades and training from Chameleon before voting to issue an RFP. Be sure the commission receives a report directly from Chameleon, not a summary from management. If, after reviewing the report, the commission opts to issue an RFP, then please uphold the commission's motion of 9/11/2012 with the addition that the majority of panelists from outside the department are from other municipal animal control agencies. Ideally, someone not subject to management retaliation should select the panelists from the following areas: administration, clerical, shelter, veterinary care, and enforcement. And this, again, this is not me writing, this is a former commissioner. Do not allow management to do an end run around the last motion, lest you find any motion you make that management doesn't like ignored, okay, like the last ruling, ignored and brought back after you're replaced.
Well, the story of Animal Issues, Los Angeles. I would repeat exactly, so I concur completely with what Ms. Davis just said. It was very important. This whole process is already tainted because, to give you an example of how little knowledge there was, the department was asking for an all-cloud system with nothing else. That doesn't sound like a department that has clearly an idea of what you need for a governmental agency. The Chameleon system serves the shelters across the country. They serve the county of LA. We wouldn't think of going with anything else. Other agencies have tried. You disrupt the entire process, you lose records, and then they have to come back to Chameleon. You ask the county of Los Angeles for any report from animal control, you'll have it just like that. They use Chameleon. Chameleon upgrades constantly to the state of the art because that's all they do. They do not sell insurance. They do not sell the Pet Point things that were being sold. Best Friends signed up with Pet Point, which was the tailored bid that Ms. Barnette wrote, and all of the emails that they gave there that were designed in the end of 2011, according to this. That's when she began pushing for Pet Point for the city of LA, so that they could sell their products and have an access to city records. This does not include anything about law enforcement. It's not even mentioned. This is a law enforcement agency. You cannot just remove your law enforcement, your interface with the police department, with the DAs, all of the things that are going on in this department cannot just be done by some company that has a box system. Chameleon, Sue Matson, the most sophisticated person we have come in here on IT, said, Chameleon can do this. She said it at the last meeting. So we need to look, I agree absolutely, you need to look seriously first at what's out there and why is Ms. Barnette trying to change this right now.
Terry and Carol.
Carrie Austin, Yanez Foundation. My concern is that if there's any money being spent and there's still money coming out of the spay neuter budget, I'm going to see if you cannot spend it on something else, so there could be money left for spay neuter. As far as the bidding goes, we've had issues in the past with the way RFPs have been done. One such one was the one from Mission Hills. There wasn't an RFP because one of the commissioners said, well, this is the usual way you do with an RFP. There was a letter of intent sent to what the department thought were the interested parties. The letter was not received by myself or the Heigl Foundation or the ASPC or SPCA, LA, or any other organizations that I knew. And the letter of intent was, were we interested in using a city shelter for $1 a year? And none of us got a bite at the apple. So that was, and then when we asked, well, who did this letter go to? Mr. Salazar said, well, there's a list in the department, but nobody ever saw the list. No commission, no councilman saw it. Nobody knew who was on that list, and nobody could tell us when asked. And you can go back and listen to the meeting. He was asked, who was on the list? And he went, it's the list we have in the department. But none of the organizations that I know who might have been interested actually got a letter. So when the RFP goes out or when people are being asked, I think you should ask for a list of who did you send it to? Because I think when RFPs are sent out, very often if they're listed on the website, you want to make sure that the people that you might be interested, maybe from investigation you've done, that you want to make sure that different parties were made aware. There's nothing wrong with the department reaching out and sending RFPs to people rather than just posting them and hoping people see them. At the last meeting, one of the RFPs was being talked about the chips. And a member of the public got up and said, oh yeah, the chips are horrible and they're just terrible. And proposed they'd like the found animal chips. And I don't have anything against found animal chips, except that we've been using the Avid chips for as long as they've been available. I've never had a problem with them. They're incredibly easy to use. They always answer their phone. And I was wondering where that came from. So I think when you get vendors, reach out to the vendors. I can't believe they won't come down here to tout their product. Thank you.
Periel Stanfield, and I live in North Hollywood. Okay, so a few things. One is obviously that software can be a big problem. We just look at the Obamacare website and see what happened with that. Now, to me, I think that if there's any way to use the existing system and upgrade it, I would think that that would be preferable because the employees are used to it. And there wouldn't be that much of a learning curve. Hopefully they have improved their system by now. I find it hard to believe that they haven't upgraded you as the years go by. Usually, software companies offer upgrades when they have an upgrade, they say, hey, we've got the latest version, why don't you upgrade? I'm surprised that they haven't done that, and I really think that they should give some kind of a discount. I think if you stick with them, they should give a discount for not having upgraded you in all these years. That's just ridiculous to me. I'm not sure. I don't understand why they denied a server. Is that something? Is it because the budget? They say we don't have the money for servers. I mean, is that something that the public can go to City Council and say, hey, we demand that the department get servers?
Yes.
Okay, so maybe we could get together and have people, because I think it's extremely important. We have to have servers for the animal services. One of the things that I really want to, for the new software to have, I want it to be able to put more information in there. When somebody goes and they look at an animal, you know, the volunteers have so much information about the animals. We do extra pictures, we do incredible pictures, we do videos of the animals, we show them with kids, we show them interacting with other animals. You know, it really gives you a much better picture of the animal. We do bios. I would like to have that information accessible to the public. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that all? Thank you.
A couple of more questions. So the RFP is going to go out to
So when RFPs go out, they go out on the city system, so they go out to all the vendors, but then specifically, I only know of 3, there may be 4 companies big enough to handle this account. One is the current vendor, which is Chameleon. Interestingly, I thought the county was developing their own. I know they've only been able to put up 1 year worth of statistics months ago, and they're not able to keep it updated. I'll talk to Marcia about that when I see her. Pet Point, Shelter Buddies, and is there a 4th one?
Chameleon, and there's probably a 4th, yeah.
Well, there may be a 4th one. These are the only ones who are actually big enough that handle national shelters that really could possibly do what we want. And when we said somebody from field, that's the enforcement side. The language might not have been understood by everyone, but when we talk about field, that is the enforcement side. So these things are put out. You know, when we put out the one that Terry was talking about, that was put out by the CAO's office, by the way. That was not put out by us. And it went out to the like 300 people on, what do they call it, MAVE, that system that the city has.
The LA Business Virtual Network, LA Babin.
Yeah. So, but anyway, I mean, yes, Chameleon can be upgraded, can be updated. In answer to that question, I think what city ITA said to us is that in a system this old, when you start doing upgrades, you should start over because you've had this sort of taped on kind of process over a lot of different staff and a lot of different thought processes, so that we should start with something clean. It doesn't change the fact that there's still crystal reports, but it may be that the Chameleon people have developed a whole lot more custom reports. Those are all things that would have to be looked at when we went out for proposals.
And Chameleon can apply.
Right, and the RFP will go to Chameleon. They may underbid everybody by saying you can get all that with an upgrade.
Of course.
And as far as the panel, there'll be shelter staff.
Well, my proposal and my strong recommendation is that we include someone from our medical staff, someone from field enforcement, someone from shelters. I think I heard clerks mentioned. Someone from administration, our IT supervisor, someone from city IT, and then an outside consultant. And actually, the person that I was thinking about is Sue Madsen.
And so those employees are represented by unions and are under contract and are protected against any retaliation. In theory,
well,
right?
Number one, every time we've had an RFP process, I don't believe I've ever seen a voting sheet on how anyone voted. I mean, that wouldn't be appropriate.
Of course not, but just the fact is that the employees are represented by very strong unions here, and so the allegation that you would have influence.
But I think it's worthwhile to, I mean, I know Judy, I know Dr. Dreeses, and I think that both of them have really important viewpoints to bring to bear. I think that it's worth certainly having staff that will interact with the system directly, of course, but people who, perhaps somebody from the county who is very familiar with Chameleon, as they've been using Chameleon for a really long time. You know, I don't know about, I don't think Steve is actually with Pet Point any longer, Steve Zeben, who I also know, but I don't think that necessarily just having it with shelter staff instead of bringing in viewpoints of people who have worked with it along the way, who've seen the upgrades, who have maybe somebody who works at a shelter where they use Pet Point.
Well,
Would be able to bring to bear a different opinion that is based on experience of working with multiple different types of software and be able to really evaluate it from what they do on a daily basis, but also from, oh, well, gosh, this looks so much better than what we've been using. I'd love to use this in my facility.
Right, and that's exactly why Sue Madsen was somebody that I had wanted to involve in this process, is because she is very familiar and has used Humane, and she is familiar and has used some of the other softwares as well.
And I think Sue is a great inclusion. I think it would be great if we could include like somebody, I don't know what software they use with the SPCA, like we're very fortunate in that we have.
They do develop Humane.
Okay, well, we're very fortunate that we have so many agencies adjacent that it doesn't become a burden to them to come to the city of Los Angeles and help us with this, because it is in the best interest of the animals. So if we're able to pull somebody from the county and somebody from the SPCLA or maybe somebody from in the valley, and then we're able to really have a mind meld of what's going to work best for the animals here, and we can set an example of doing that.
I think it's great that Commissioner Brent brings up. Whenever you have diversity on a panel, I think you get a diverse, number of ideas on what's going to work and what's not going to work. And I think you're right, because we are in LA and we are so close to the county and the SPCA, we can pull in different people. So just so I'm clear, I just want to get from Deb, we can rule as to who was on the panel, is that correct? The commission has that power?
You are a managing commission.
Okay.
Commissioner, I just want to point out the time. It's now 10 off.
So,
and I just want one question: is there an actual cost to the RFP process? Is it something that's budgeted, or is this just
it's staff time?
Okay, that's fine.
So I guess the question, just responding to Commissioner's suggestion, would that be a problem to go with what you're looking at, but maybe add one or two people to?
I'm happy to talk to Marcia to see if she's got someone that she could spare to come and sit with us. I don't think SPCA LA applies because they're developing their own software that they're trying to sell. They would like to sell as a product, but they're not big enough yet. I think maybe Riverside might be a consideration.
I mean, I think our role is to look at what comes in and to fine tune the results of the RFP. And I think that if you guys feel comfortable with the addition of some of these other people to the panel, I have no problem moving forward with this.
I mean, I think the one thing I would say is that, we're asking a lot because we're talking probably about 3 pretty long interviews if we have 3 applicants. Help me out here if I'm right, because I mean, just for the microchip, you all spent hours on that.
Yeah, I mean, we always have an option to interview. If the panel at first blush, when they do the written sort of interview, if it's very close, then the panel has a prerogative to actually bring in people to interview, and then that gets factored into the scores as well. There doesn't have to be an interview, though.
I don't want to get in the weeds of how you guys do things, but it occurs to me that this sort of project might be worth interviews because.
I think you have to have interviews.
Because we're talking about a huge.
They need to come and sell us their product. They need to sell it to us.
You're talking about a huge change to the system that the department's going to live with for maybe not 14 years, but a long time. One other question I had just occurred to me, and maybe it's not. I was just interested in your thoughts. It looked like ITA looked at the RFP 2 years ago and contributed some input. Was that done again before this was brought to us? Because 2 years.
We didn't have them look at it again. John and I met with the general manager and talked about where the system is going and asked him for help and support on this.
Yeah, he's willing to have his staff assist us on this as well. So
okay.
We have an open offer from him.
And we felt it was important to be part of the city system.
Yeah.
And since he is the city computer system, we don't know, he knows what's on his horizon more than we do, and we need to be part of it.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy to go, me personally, I'm happy to go with issuing the RFP and given the time, maybe tabling further discussion about the panel, unless people think they're ready to also move on that.
There's no, that's not on the agenda of the panel.
Right.
Okay, right, so we can't.
So at the moment, the panel would be composed as it was in the board's last action back in September of.
No, that's not what we said in our proposal.
Right, but I think Ben was saying that the legal effect of the commission decision from a year and a half ago is still,
Right.
until we
This is
rescind it.
simply, exactly,
No.
this is simply the authority to release the RFP.
Although there's that second part that says come back with a proposal, but you're saying that that would be interpreted in conjunction with the prior action to mean that they can't come back with a proposal until.
And usually come back with a proposal is after the panel
Right.
has already made a recommendation to your general manager.
Okay, and as we sit here today, the panel is as the commission approved it a year and a half ago.
Right.
And to change that, we would have to revisit that and modify it or rescind it.
Right, but that, to some degree, is separate from releasing the RFP itself.
When we release the RFP, how much do they have, 30 or 60 days to respond?
Depends on the RFP. It can be anywhere from 2 weeks to 6 weeks usually on an RFP. And something like this could give them 3 weeks to a month just to have a good proposal.
So we'd have to discuss the panel issue by.
We don't have to release it this week. I mean,
Right.
it'll take a while for us to release it.
Sure, we can get everything ready.
Longer than 3 or 4 weeks, especially something as major like this, you may want to have them respond within 60 days, which would also give the commission time to then revisit the issue of panel while the RFP is out.
Is that okay, 60 days? Is that?
We can wait, we're not going to release it this week. I mean, and we can give them 60 days, it doesn't matter. I mean, we're in no hurry. We'd rather see what the panel makeup is.
Yeah.
I'm in a hurry because I can't imagine what the computer system is, but I hear you. Well, then I guess I would make a motion to issue the RFP as recommended by the department. And then we would put the panel issue on an upcoming agenda so that we can get that in place so that when we get the proposals, we can be in a situation where the department can act on that. There's something else I had in mind, but I can't think of it. So that would be my motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0.
Okay.
Next item is the oral report of the general manager. You have 3 minutes.